It's your home for the first reaction and analysis after the Dogs play. This is DawgNation Postgame, brought to you by Cercheros, Georgia Spa Company, Circle K, and the UGA Bookstore. Now here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Hello, Dawg Nation. I'm Brandon Adams. We're live on the field here in the Superdome in New Orleans. Behind me, you know the scene. The Ole Miss Rebels are celebrating having won the Sugar Bowl over Georgia here today. It is Ole Miss with their brand new head coach, Pete Golding, in just his second game ever as a coach, that gets what I can only describe as a stunning win over Georgia. This was a game and Georgia seemed to be well in control of. They were up 21-12. You're relatively late in the third quarter. And then the offense for Georgia just goes into a shell. A period of 5 straight drives included 2 punts, a missed field goal. Georgia had to fake a 4th down and a punt just to get a field goal. And then obviously trying to do the same trick that Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame had done a year ago, running the punt team off on 4th down, offense on. That results in a fumble. That's a series of 5 straight drives that only get 3 points for UGA. And in and around that time, Trinidad Chambliss, to his credit, goes off. And he went into an absolute magician act, eluding would-be tacklers, this close to being sacked. It doesn't happen. They convert a big 4th down. He makes magic happen. And then suddenly this Ole Miss offense gets hot, and all of a sudden they're going to walk out of here today as a 37-34 winner over Georgia. I can barely hear. It's so loud. There's 8 million Ole Miss fans in here. It's amazing. Georgia wins the SEC, goes 13-1, and plays a playoff game on the road, essentially. I don't know what you do about that. But nonetheless, it's just an absolute heartbreaking way for this season for Georgia to come to an end. And as I said before, I can only call it a stunning loss. I don't think many of us, while we expected this game to be close and competitive, I don't think many of us thought that Georgia would lose to Ole Miss today, given the circumstances. And for a Georgia team that has made believers out of us, as the season has progressed, with Georgia seemingly playing at its best to end the season, including the SEC championship. You had this. You had a semifinal matchup against Miami. You would have been a point spread favorite in that game. A team that would have been a point spread favorite against you. Ohio State had been eliminated. Your longtime nemesis Alabama had been eliminated. This felt like a real opportunity for Georgia, but now it's going to be an opportunity lost. Are y'all shooting those off? Okay. They've got pyrotechnics 5 inches from my face. Anyway, Georgia loses in the Sugar Bowl to Ole Miss. Want to hear from you about it. 678-645-DAWG, DAWG, 678-645-DAWG. That is the phone number. Hop in here and talk to us there. You can also click the link. You're watching on Facebook, on YouTube, on DawgNation.com. We're going to break down what we saw here tonight and really how what seemed to be going very well for Georgia just completely stopped. If you want to think about halfway through the second quarter of this game, for instance, Georgia seemed to be well in control of the running game. Nate Frazier was getting whatever he wanted. Georgia was moving bodies up front, and then it just stopped. Now, I'm going to give credit to the opponent on that. I thought that Ole Miss bowed its back. I thought it was creeping more bodies up the line of scrimmage. It was daring Georgia to do something to stop them from doing that, basically daring them to do something to stop them, but ultimately they just couldn't do it. I mean, today was a day in which I think a lot of Georgia fans spent a good bit of time just looking around and wondering, is there going to be a playmaker emerge here? And other than Zachariah Branch, for the most part, we didn't see that. Georgia really went into a shell offensively, and this turned into a very, very disappointing outcome. So we'll hear from you on this. Click the Zoom link. Give us a call, 678-645-DAWG, DAWG. That's the phone number. But as we've done all season long, a guy whose analysis is always terrific and I'm going to need him tonight because I'm not quite so sure what to say about this. This one took a dramatic turn in the wrong direction. All right, we'll get Rodrigo Blankenship coming up. Let's take a moment to hear Kirby Smart here as he speaks right now on how this one got away from Georgia.
Welcome to the official post-game press conference for the College Football Playoff quarterfinal at the All-State Sugar Bowl. Please turn off all cell phones for the press conference. We will begin with Coach Kirby Smart and Gunnar Stockton and Dalen Everett from Georgia. As a reminder, the team locker room is also open at this time, and we also have breakout interview areas near the locker room. Coach Smart will make an opening statement, and then we'll open up the floor to questions. Coach?
Yeah, I'd open with the Sugar Bowl staff committee. Well, they did a wonderful job hosting us. Felt safe all week or the 3 days we were here. They did a great job of bringing New Orleans into our hotel, and I know our players enjoyed being here. It felt very different than last year in terms of the environment and everything. Great crowd out there today. Probably more partisan Ole Miss than ours, but it felt like you were on a road game with their atmosphere, and they had momentum a lot. It was a back and forth game. It's an incredible college football game. It's what the CFP was built for, to have battles like that. And that was basically every conference game we had this year. I felt like every game was like that one, back, forth, plays being made all over. And a lot of credit goes to Ole Miss. The defensive improvements they made, they played much better and tougher and more physical on defense, created some problems for us. And their quarterback is just incredible. I mean, he does an unbelievable job of not giving up sacks and making plays with his legs. And they made more plays than we did. And I got to be honest, that's part of football. They made more and out-executed us, out-coached us, outplayed us. But I enjoyed that game and that atmosphere. I am proud of our team. I'm sick that we lost, and there's things I would love to go back and do differently, but I'm just so proud of the way our guys competed. Went down 10 and just didn't finish it.
Please raise your hands and we'll get the mic.
So that's Kirby Smart right there. We may hear some more from him in a moment, but obviously speaking his opening press conference live as it happens in the bowels here of the Superdome. Now we'll turn our attention to Rodrigo Blankenship. Rodrigo, thanks for your time. You hear Kirby Smart there giving, first of all, credit to Trinidad Chambliss. When the Georgia offense goes in, actually, we'll hear some more from Kirby here. Here's more from Kirby.
3 or 4. We wanted to score and win. I mean, the book says go win the game. We talked about it in between. I talked about calling a timeout, run it. They don't have timeouts, ease the clock down. You're playing for a tie doing that, right? And I just don't believe in playing for a tie. I had to go for a tie after we didn't complete it, but we knew we were going to leave them time on the clock. We felt like defensively we were playing well, and to be honest with you, it was a 2-point play to win the Sugar Bowl, or at least have a chance to win the Sugar Bowl, because they would have got the ball back. But I feel really good about that. I didn't want to, run it. We ran it on second, thinking that we could do it, and they got a look, and Gunnar did a good job checking that run.
We'll go to the left side, second row.
That's the play.
Kirby. And you guys had the punt team on, ran them off, put the offense on. What was the thinking there, particularly snapping the ball and trying to convert on that fourth down?
Yeah, we screwed that up a little bit. We had a misfire there. It was a change up from the look we had done twice, and we knew teams were going to sit back and not honor us because we had not snapped it on those plays in 2 different locations, 2 different times, and the ball was not supposed to be snapped in that situation. But that was on us as coaches. It was on me and our guys. It's not on the players, and Gunnar and those guys did a nice job executing it. But we did feel like we had lost momentum at that point, and the book says we needed to go for it. That's probably another way I would like to have gone for it, but we did not execute the situation really well there. It was a situation where it gave us an either or. We didn't have to snap it. We could take a delay. We could sit back and see what happened just to take a chance.
All right, right side, front row.
You already answered part of my question, but you went for it on 4th down 3 times in the second half. You mentioned you felt momentum was slipping away even when you had the lead. 2 of the 3 worked, the one. But did you feel like you mentioned Ole Miss was making more plays. Did you feel like you needed to have that kind of change of momentum?
Well, I don't know which fourth you're referring to. I think we had to go for one of them because we were down.
Yeah, you were down. There was like you had 3 timeouts left. There's 3 minutes, 15 seconds left. It was 4th and 9, but you made it.
I couldn't kick the field goal.
Yeah, you could have punted, but you didn't. That wasn't
no chance.
No chance on that. Okay,
we're not going to get another possession possibly, and we had 3 timeouts to stop them if they didn't get it.
Okay, fair enough. The fake punt though, when you were leading, which worked.
We had lost momentum at that point, and we were leading, but I think we were leading maybe by 2 or so, and we felt like we could get momentum back with that play, and we felt like it was there, and the kids did a great job executing it.
So there you hear Kirby Smart talking about some of the decisions, including the decision to throw the ball to Oscar Delp on the 3rd down play. They don't get that. They have to tie the game. And then some aggressive calls on 4th down, just trying to regain momentum that obviously had slipped away from Georgia for a lot of this game in the second half. You can go to the Dawg Nation YouTube page. That press conference happening live right now. You can see more of that in a moment. Let's react, though, to what we're hearing. We've got Rodrigo Blankenship standing by. Let's get to Rodrigo right now with your calls also coming up here, too. So, Rodrigo, you're hearing a lot from Kirby Smart there, but in the opening statement that we heard from Smart a moment ago, obviously giving credit for when the Georgia offense, I don't know, kind of ran out of gas, Trinidad Chambliss took his game to a different level. This was a star-making turn for Chambliss in many ways, and in the second half of this game, Georgia offensively just could not match that. What was your reaction to what you just saw?
Yeah, I think that you hit on a lot of the big points. I think that looking at how this game went down, how this matchup went down the first game, it's just an offensive battle back and forth. I think that's what I was preparing for this game. Even though we had seen a lot of improvements from our defense in recent weeks, Ole Miss offense still presents a lot of problems. They had, 5 wideouts with over 500 yards and multiple touchdowns coming into this game. So Ole Miss still presented a lot of problems as they did in the first matchup. And so I was really expecting a shootout as we got ultimately in this one. But when the game started off with, Ole Miss punting on their first drive and, Georgia punting on their first drive as well, I'm like, okay, maybe this could be a little bit different type of a feel of a game. Maybe this one's going to go a little bit slower, and this is going to be a little bit more of a defensive matchup. And ultimately in the first half, that's kind of what it felt like. Georgia holding Ole Miss to only 12 points in the first half, holding them to back-to-back 50-plus yard field goals. Ole Miss hadn't gotten inside our 35-yard line for most of the first half, and I felt like, okay, maybe this is how we're going to be able to win this one is, we're going to lean on our defense a little bit more. They're going to make some stops, hold them to field goals, eventually make them punt a few more times than we had to make them do in the first game. But, as you said, in the second half, Trinidad Chambliss really just, kind of took over. He, showed us why Lane Kiffin wanted him to be a part of his program so badly, why he was recruited to come play for Ole Miss, because he's a big-time playmaker and he was able to make some very timely plays. I think about a time in the fourth quarter where he had back-to-back plays moving out to his left and extending plays and allowing them to, have positive plays, have positive yardage on plays. I think about one play where Dalen Everett is coming off the edge on a corner blitz, and he kind of takes a poor rush angle, allows Trinidad Chambliss to loop back around, move out to his left, and just make a very timely play there. And he just turned it on. He turned it on in a way that we really didn't really allow him to in the first game. Some of the keys that I talked about with Kaylee in our pregame show was trying to make him uncomfortable, because his stats at home versus when he's not at home were significantly different. His completion percentage is way down when he's not at home. So I thought if we could make him uncomfortable, make him less at ease, accelerate his decision-making process, that we would have a really good chance to win. I also talked about trying to limit explosive plays, and I feel like kind of went the opposite direction in that regard. I feel like Ole Miss had more explosive plays, with their offense tonight than we saw from them the first time around, or at least that's what it felt like. Maybe they just came at all the right times to make it feel like they were just constantly getting the explosive plays when they needed it. But Trinidad Chambliss is obviously a great playmaker. He's a great quarterback. I think the best quarterback that Georgia has seen so far this year, and he may be the best quarterback left in the college football playoff. I would be hard pressed to believe another quarterback can play as well as he is going to be capable of playing for whatever we're going to have left with the rest of these college football playoffs. So hats off to Trinidad Chambliss and the Ole Miss offense. Hats off to their defense for making some adjustments. Georgia also punted a lot more times in this game than we had to in the first matchup, so their defense made just enough adjustments. And as Coach Smart said, Ole Miss just made a few more plays than we did. I do think there were some instances where, perhaps the coaching wasn't what it should have been. Coach Smart looking back at that decision to have the punt exchange where you send on the punt team, take the punt team off and run the offense back out there, try and catch them with their pants down, and then, Ole Miss didn't necessarily adjust in the way that maybe we would have liked to see in order to run a play successfully. I think it would have been nice to have a timeout called there and punt the ball away, give your defense more yardage to work with, because that put our defense in a bad spot, down by 10 points with 8 minutes to go. Just didn't really feel like the best decision at that point in time. There were some highlights from the coaching standpoint. Obviously, getting that fake punt conversion was big time. That was very much needed to get some momentum back in our favor, push our lead from 2 up to 5 points at that point in the game. But overall, I do feel like, Ole Miss just made a few more plays, and the coaching wasn't quite what it had been up to this point in the season. Also thinking about that 3rd and 5 conversion that set up their field goal there at the end of the game, where we're at 3rd and 5 there, playing press coverage. Didn't really love that. Didn't love that decision either. But plenty more that we can talk about the rest of the show.
Yeah, 678-645-DAWG. That's the phone number, DAWG. 678-645-DAWG. Also, click the link. Join us live via Zoom here tonight. We'll get reaction here as Georgia lets a lead slip away. And what I think is a real opportunity to make a run in the college football playoff, a game you were favored in tonight against a coach just beginning his career, a team you'd already beaten early this season. But what in many ways felt like a collapse to me, Georgia letting a lead slip away and letting a golden opportunity essentially evaporate. We'll talk about it here tonight. Chris is in Buffalo. You're first up here on our DawgNation Postgame call-in show. We're live at the Superdome. Ole Miss fans are still celebrating. It's almost mass chaos. There are all kinds of Ole Miss fans trying to make their way onto the field here. But either way, Chris, you're first up here on our DawgNation Postgame call-in show. Your thoughts on Georgia getting a loss that, frankly, I find pretty hard to describe and hard to believe. What'd you think about it, Chris?
Hey, BA. Thanks for taking the call. Just a quick thing. Be careful out there with the confetti cannons. Don't need to lose you on top of, the result from the game today, too.
Chris, I'm gonna let you. Hey, Chris, I'm gonna let you finish your point. I'm gonna let you finish your point in a second. When I tell you right now, I looked over to my left, and they had a big pyrotechnic thing. It looked just like a Civil War cannon pointed right at me. I thought, are y'all about to fire this thing off? Because if so, I'm going to run for my life here. So I appreciate the advice on that. If they bring the pyrotechnics out, I'm heading for the hills. I promise you.
Yeah, so, I'm surrounded by about 3 feet of snow right now. So, I got worse things going on than the loss of the game. But I'll be honest, I called in, after the Tech game and had kind of a similar point, with 1:55 left in the first half, all the timeouts, and just ultra conservative again on trying to an opportunity to go down the field and at a minimum get in a field goal range, and they go 3 and out. And thankfully they get they get a little lucky with Ole Miss fumbling it away there at the end of the half to not get their own field goal. But then coming out just absolutely flat out of the second half, and they just that's 2 opportunities to extend that what was already a 2-score lead even further. And if you're Ole Miss, you got to think, God, that's just the biggest opportunity they handed to us possible. And then not only that, you get the 4th down stop at midfield, and again, the offense doesn't do anything. And on top of that, and then, the end of the game play calling with the offense down in the red zone there to finish it up on the goal line, we've been seeing Bobo screens all year, and you're trying to get a high percentage pass instead of running it so that you can run down that clock as far as possible. And somehow they draw up a play call with a super low success rate to the back of the end zone for a tight end when they needed something that could have at least gotten them. You guarantee the tie, you work it down to about, I think, 19 seconds would have been left. I'm not a whole, fire the whole staff, everybody's got to go, but, man, there's a track record here from this year of just really mismanaging clock time and kind of having some questionable decisions on what they want to do play calling wise.
Yeah, Chris, I think it's a good phone call, and I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying there, that, when you look at how conservatively Georgia played against Georgia Tech, that it does feel like a little bit of a harbinger for what we saw tonight. And Rodrigo, I'll bring you back in on this. When Georgia was playing it pretty safe towards the end of the first half, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I thought this was one of those games where frankly, I thought if Georgia could find one more score, Ole Miss might tap out. I'm just being honest. I thought they might. And chewing up clock, playing a game at a much less frantic pace than the one these 2 teams played in October, I thought that was a reasonable strategy for Georgia. I really did. But then 1 3 and out turns into another. And all of a sudden, as I mentioned, you had a series of 5 drives where you only come away with 3 points. That's devastating. And in the midst of all of that, it created an opportunity for Ole Miss to get hot. And so I do think you can look back and say, when the running game was working for Georgia, then Ole Miss up front started making some plays, and they started winning some of those battles with Georgia blockers. At that point, this game changed, and then, Rodrigo, to my eyes, Georgia didn't really throw a counter punch once the Ole Miss defensive front started absorbing the Georgia running game.
Yeah, early in the first half, it felt like Nate Frazier was, rattling off 6 and 7 yard runs pretty much at will, as you said. And then later in the game, we saw Ole Miss be able to make a little bit of adjustment, maybe just being a little bit more physical at the point of attack, started to turn those 6 and 7 yard runs into, maybe 3 and 4 yard runs. And then your offense isn't in as favorable of down and distance situations on 2nd and 3rd down. And, we saw that Georgia started to go to the pass game a little bit more to look for answers. And ultimately, outside of Zachariah Branch, we didn't see that many big plays get made in the pass game. So, I think that was Georgia's formula this whole season, is make sure that we establish the run and, just be able to lean on that for when our offense needs it. And early in the game, we had that, obviously, with Nate Frazier going down, and I hope that he's going to be okay. It looked like a pretty serious injury, but I hope that he's going to be okay. Obviously, he's had an incredible season here, and, hopefully he can continue to do some more great things for the Dogs with whatever time he's going to have left. But, he was doing really well. Chauncey Bowens came in and had a few nice carries, but, like you said, they did make some adjustments, and those big runs weren't as big at a certain point in the game. I think that we kind of got it back later in the game in the fourth quarter. It started to feel like we were starting to get some more of those 6 and 7 and 8 yard runs again, and it felt like maybe one of those might pop and turn into an explosive play. They ultimately never did, but Ole Miss did a good job of adjusting, just being able to play at a higher level to mitigate our run game better than they did the first time around. Their run defense had been a more susceptible part of their defense to this point in the season, and they did a good job of making some adjustments there. So hats off to them again for being able to play a little bit better game defensively. As our caller mentioned, I think that there was definitely a little bit of questionable play calling, whether it be from the offense or the defense. I look at several instances throughout the game where I feel like we probably could have handled things a little bit differently. Everyone liked to make jokes about the Mike Bobo screen passes, all throughout the season, but now we were looking for a Mike Bobo screen in that situation because, as he said, it's a higher percentage throw. If you get tackled in bounds, you're going to run off more time from the clock and you're going to kick a field goal with a lot less time left on the clock, and Ole Miss may just decide to take a knee and play for overtime at that point. So it just felt like there was a little bit of questionable decision making, and maybe I would look at it in terms of there was an inconsistent level of aggressiveness with our play calling. As you said, being a little bit more passive at the end of the first half, but then in the second half, calling a fake punt pass, with the guy that nobody's ever heard of from your own 30-yard line. That's super aggressive. So you just had this very inconsistent level of aggressiveness in terms of your play calling throughout the game that, ultimately in the end ended up coming back to nip us in the butt.
And Rodrigo, we'll go back to phones after this. I mean, I think there was also a stretch. I just don't know that anybody, other than maybe Zachariah Branch, I don't know that anybody was getting open.
Yes, I agree. I think that Zachariah Branch once again, made some very timely plays when he needed it, especially that diving touchdown catch in the end zone. That was an incredible play by him. Had another very crucial conversion on 4th and 9, trying to get back in the game. So, Zachariah Branch just did a great job today. Colby Young obviously had one incredible diving catch that I can remember earlier in the game. But, outside of Zachariah Branch and his production, as we've always come to expect from him, he just done a great job all season. We didn't really see any other pass catchers step up. We had a couple of deep shot attempts to Talon Taylor. One of them didn't really amount to anything, and another one we had a defensive pass interference, which helped us move the ball and convert and get a first down. But other than that, we really didn't see a whole lot of production out of the receiving core or the tight end. So, it's unfortunate. Obviously, we had kind of been able to get away with just relying on Zachariah Branch up to this point in the season. Was really hoping that having Colby Young come back, we were going to be able to see, that extra layer of the pass game be able to come back that we hadn't really seen in some previous weeks, because he has been a very great playmaker for us, when he's been available earlier in the season, but we just didn't really see that today. But Zachariah Branch can't ask for any more than what he did. He played his heart out. He was incredible. Also had a very nice punt return that allowed us to get a score late in the game. So he did everything he could in every opportunity that he was given. We just didn't really get enough production out of the rest of our receiving core tonight.
Let me get Adrian and Evans. Adrian, you're next up on our DawgNation Postgame call-in show. Adrian, glad to have you on the program. Georgia's season comes to a disappointing conclusion. What's your reaction to what you saw? Adrian, you with us? Go ahead, Adrian. You're live on our DawgNation Postgame call-in show. Adrian, take it away. I tell you, let's try Trinity and Marietta. Trinity, you're next up on our DawgNation Postgame call-in show. Trinity, tell us what you thought. All right. How about Jonathan in Hawkinsville? I know Jonathan won't let us down here. Jonathan, you're next up on our DawgNation Postgame call-in show. Jonathan, give us a reaction here. Georgia, I think a pretty shocking loss here to Ole Miss tonight. Give me your reaction to it, Jonathan.
Yeah, BA, it was shocking, especially the way the first quarter was going. I'm just going to say that it's criminal the way our secondary played a good bit of that game with leaving people wide open. And the only thing I'm going to say is how was that not targeting on Gunner? And it was targeting on one of their players. Like one of my favorite song writers and singers said, every dog has its day, BA.
That's exactly right, Jonathan. Appreciate the phone call. And obviously, there'll be more bright days to come for Georgia in the future, but this is certainly not it. Jonathan, I think you're right about that. And I didn't like the targeting call on Ja'Cory Thomas either. I don't like the rule. I think I don't. The rule that's supposed to exist for player safety, I think it's essentially arbitrarily enforced. So I think I don't think it's working out the way that people wanted to in football. Obviously, that hurts Thomas tonight. And there was a stretch where, because of Thomas and the targeting, K.J. Bolden got banged up for a while. Georgia was playing at safety with both Zion Branch and Adrian Maddox for a moment. Now, Zion ended up making one of the bigger plays of the game, and had Georgia gone on to win, it would have been one of the bigger plays of the season, dislodging that football late in the game. That was almost a huge moment for Zion. But you had a stretch in the second half where you were really thin and very inexperienced with the secondary. And, Rodrigo, I'll bring you back in on what Jonathan was also saying. There were some breakdowns in the secondary, Ole Miss receivers getting open. I'm not here to excuse make. Obviously, you got to lock that down. But I do think this Georgia defense in the second half was asked to be on the field a lot. And they're chasing after Chambliss. Plays are lasting a long time. That means defensive backs are running with the play live a long time. This is not an excuse. I'm not trying to explain all of this away. But I do think some of what you saw from this Georgia defense, the secondary, including the cornerbacks, I think some of that was just getting gassed here late in the game. Not an excuse. I'm not trying to wipe it away. But I do think that's part of the reasoning for some of the big bust that you got there. Let me let you answer that, and then we'll go hear from Pete Golding here in a second.
Yes, I do think that the defense was on the field a lot in the second half with the offense, not being able to sustain drives like we saw them in the first matchup. Your defense is going to be on the field a lot more. There's just going to be a lot more opportunities for things to break down. And, something that we had talked about over the last few weeks, one of the big reasons why this defense has seen so much improvement is because we saw a lot of improvement from the pass rush. And when you're getting more effective pass rush, it kind of takes some of the pressure off of your secondary because the opposing team's quarterback has to get rid of the ball sooner. And we saw that earlier in the game where our pass rush was getting home. Trinidad Chambliss was having to accelerate his decision-making process, make some throws earlier than he wanted to. We saw some inaccurate passes, some early passes that came out of his hand prematurely because he didn't really want to throw it yet. But we were forcing his hand to a certain extent in the first half, and that's what allowed us to limit them to only 12 points in the first half. But in the second half, our pass rush really wasn't getting home. So as you said, the DBs are having to cover these receivers for an extended period of time. When you're not getting there, when you're sending extra rushers, as I mentioned earlier with that Dalen Everett, corner blitz, if that doesn't get home, your secondary is really in a bind because you have one of your best coverage players trying to make a tackle in the backfield, and then when he gets out leveraged, all bets are off. So when your pass rush isn't getting there, that really puts your secondary in a bind. As you said, we, at a certain point in time had some very inexperienced guys on the field. Coach Smart has always talked about with this modern era of college football, everybody's depth gets tested, very quickly. When your starters go down for whatever reason, whether it be an injury or an ejection, whatever the case may be, depth is a very big issue in college football right now. So you better hope that your starters can stay on the field from start to finish because the depth is, just being depleted. The talent is being dispersed all across college football. So, we saw that to a certain extent. And as we talked about earlier in the show, Ole Miss having one of the most explosive passing offenses in the country, those two things don't really go well together. So if your pass rush isn't getting home, you've got inexperienced guys in the secondary because you've got guys going out for targeting or injuries, whatever the case may be, that's not going to be a recipe for success for this Georgia team.
Rodrigo, hang with me for a second if you can. Let's hear Pete Golding, obviously a much happier coach than maybe Kirby Smart was a moment ago. Here is Golding getting his second, and to this point, by far the biggest win of his coaching career. Pete Golding speaking live right now.
Trinidad, just first of all, what are the emotions like for you right now? And then two, the last time you played them, you guys lost that fourth quarter. This time you were able to win the fourth quarter. I guess from your perspective, what was the biggest difference?
Yeah, my emotion right now is crazy right now. Really speechless, honestly, about everything because, it was that same point. We were down 9, or they were down 9 last time we played them, so it was kind of like roles reversed. Then obviously, played them before. I didn't play my best in the fourth quarter, so I wanted to redeem myself and, get back again. So honestly, just trusting my guys. Our coaches put us in a great position, and we executed.
We'll move to the left side along the aisle.
So there you hear Trinidad Chambliss there talking about what Ole Miss was able to do, and obviously you want more of that. We'll have it for you on our DawgNation video channels. I'm sure you can see more of that if you'd like to. And if you don't want to, well, I don't fault you at all because I'm not quite sure I do either. Let's get Joseph and Griffin. Joseph, you're next up on our DawgNation post-game call-in show tonight. Joseph, heartbreaking loss. It seemed like this was going a good direction for Georgia. Then somewhere along the way it just changed. What's your reaction to it?
BA, Happy New Year to you and Rodrigo.
Happy New Year.
This year didn't come in like I thought it would for the Dogs this year, but we got, as Kirby said, we got to go back to the lab. We got to get better. Our edge, we didn't have an edge. He was getting outside on the edge all the time. I think Bobo should have been having Gunner to roll out. He should roll out passing because I think. I'm not mistaken, the ball got batted at least 5 times when he was in the pocket. Our offensive line tonight didn't come to play. Like y'all said earlier, we come out of halftime and we just go 3 and out. We can't do that. We know who we are. We run the ball. Get the tight ends involved. We got one of the best tight end rooms in the nation. None of the tight ends got involved in this game, really. True enough, they blocked and everything, but we didn't get them involved like we did in the first game against Ole Miss. We got to get back to who we are. Our DNA is running the ball, get the tight end. Once you get the tight ends involved, running the ball, then you can get the wide receivers involved. Yeah, we got to get better. And get our edge. We need that edge rushing again. We got to in the NIL. Kirby got to go out there and find some people to compete and bring them into the system and compete against the guys that he already have because we got to get better. This is getting unsacked for us to be in the Sugar Bowl. We should have won that game. That game was a winnable game, but again, I tip my hat to Ole Miss. They won it, but to me. Because I'm biased, I think we should have won that game. But again, that's how it goes. Somebody got to win, somebody got to lose, and we lost.
No, Joseph, I think that's a really good phone call, and I appreciate that. And Rodrigo, I think that Joseph brings up a couple pretty good points. Obviously, Georgia today playing without Gabe Harris, for instance. That's a guy that would have helped seal and set the edge for the Georgia defense. In the real moment when the game is – if there's fog of war and the game's going on, sometimes it's hard to tell how much of an impact something like that was making. How much today did you notice to say, well, if Zero had been out there might have been a little bit more success, or maybe a couple of those times in which Chambliss was running for his life, maybe Georgia actually gets him down. With the big injury for Georgia, Gabe Harris not playing, how much do you think that did impact Georgia here today?
Well, no, I think that we had seen him make plays in some very crucial times earlier in the season. So I do think that the defense, missed his presence there to some extent tonight. But really, I think that the effectiveness that we've seen from this Georgia defense in the last probably 5 to 6 weeks, with their increased ability to rush the pressure, has, to rush the passer, has really come as more of a pressure by committee type situation. I feel like the reason that they've had the success that they've had hasn't been because of the elevated play of one single, guy on the defensive line. I think that really it's just been because of a change change in play calling. I feel like Coach Schumann and Coach Smart have done a good job of kind of changing their mindset and their mentality about how we get pressure on the quarterback, because we saw early in the season we weren't really getting home with just 4 rushers or 5 rushers. And so over the course of the last 5 to 6 weeks, I think we saw a lot more pressure coming from the second level, whether it be from sending the linebackers or from sending the secondary. As we saw multiple times throughout the game tonight, that's how Georgia was able to get pressure. So, even if that defensive line is just occupying the offensive lineman that's in front of them, with a one-on-one, engagement, just leaving those extra rushers free to get through the gaps and affect the quarterback, that's how we had seen a lot of our, increased pressure on quarterbacks in the last few weeks. And so, I do think that Coach Smart always likes to preach a next man up mentality, and for the most part, I feel like we saw that today. I do feel like there was also a point in time where Raylan Wilson went out. They were talking about how he was on the bike and had been assessed by the medical team, and I don't remember if he came back in the game after that point. So,
he did come back in. Yeah, he did come back in.
Okay. Well, I mean,
he did come back, but that's another guy though. But and I'll let you finish your point. But that's another guy, very important player for Georgia that it had to be without for a good portion today. Between Nate and Raylan and KJ, a lot of very important players missed a portion of this game today, and their absence was felt when they're not in there, right?
Yes, absolutely. Their presence was absolutely felt. I mean, these are guys that have made plays for this defense throughout the course of the season, that have had very timely plays. It felt like this might be another, Dalen Everett legacy type of game, with him having the scoop and score, having his 2 interceptions in the SEC championship last year. He obviously had a big impact on that game, having the scoop and score in the first half of this game, and then almost coming away with that interception on the sideline, which would have prevented that game-winning field goal attempt for Ole Miss. It was that, I think it was a second down play before their 4th down field goal. He jumped that route going out to the sidelines and almost intercepted it. If he had come away with that interception, sends the game into overtime, or gives Georgia an opportunity to attempt a game-winning field goal of their own, that really would have cemented him, with another, incredible legacy game, as we have seen him have on a couple of occasions previously in his career. But we definitely felt the, the absence of some of our big playmakers tonight, including, on the defensive line especially.
And then very quick before we go back to the phones, the other thing our previous caller mentioned, and, people can diagnose this, and I'm sure different people have different opinions, but it certainly did not seem like the Georgia offensive line had its best game, and not really in keeping with what we had seen from this group over the course of the month of November, for instance, or the dominance, I believe, that showed against Alabama. That wasn't really the Georgia offensive line performance we got tonight, was it?
No, I don't think it was. And maybe there was a little bit of extra motivation that these guys came in with for the Alabama game in the SEC championship, that maybe we saw from the Ole Miss team, kind of on the other side of the coin, where Alabama had beat us early in the season. And so when you get the opportunity to go for a rematch in the SEC championship, as Trinidad Chambliss put it, he wanted to get his lick back. And I think that this Georgia team wanted to get their licks back against Alabama in that SEC championship game. And so maybe that just gave them a little bit of extra fuel and a little bit of extra fire that we saw from this offensive line in that game, that allowed us to do the things that we did, control the line of scrimmage, run the ball very effectively, as we had talked about, at times we did run the ball very effectively, very efficiently. Nate Frazier was averaging 6 yards a carry before his injury. So at least when Nate Frazier was in the game, we were running the ball very well. And so there were times when this offensive line, it felt like, was imposing their will. And I'm screaming at the TV to say, why don't we run the ball more? Because there were 3 or 4 drives in a row in the second half where we passed on first down. And it felt like, well, maybe if we just run the ball, we have a better, down and distance for second down. And just allows us to have a little bit more production with our offense coming out of the second half, when we ultimately ended up coming out pretty flat to start the second half. So, the offensive line did good things. I know we've also talked about this offensive line is very young. We have a lot of guys who are starting for the first time this season. So I think that we will return most of this offensive line next year with another year of growth, in the film room, in the weight room, getting stronger, just, developing under Coach Smart, just developing under the offensive system, just developing more grit and more toughness. I think that will only allow our offensive line to improve, so that hopefully we don't have some of these same feelings at this point next year, where hopefully we can just trust that our offensive line is going to dominate anytime we need them to be able to run the ball and take care of Gunnar Stockton when he drops back to pass as well.
Rodrigo, I know it's late. We'll get a final thought from you coming up and have plenty more phone calls after that. Jeff Sentell going to join us here as well. Let me squeeze in one more phone call before we get there. Let's go back to the phones and talk to Jacob in Dothan. Jacob, you're next up on our DawgNation Postgame call-in show. Jacob, react to this with us here. Georgia loses a game that I think is going to hurt DawgNation here tonight, so help us make sense of what we just saw.
Hey, BA. First of all, I want to say I love the show. Love hearing y'all talk, everything Georgia football all the time. And first off, I want to say we got to stop playing in the Sugar Bowl, man. I don't know who we got to talk to about that, but, with the exception of the Baylor game a few years ago, I haven't really liked a lot of these outcomes. But a lot can be said about, Bobo's play calling all year. I won't get too much into that, but, that call tonight on that pivotal 3rd and goal there at the end of the game, it just kind of baffles me. I know the first caller kind of went in more detail than I'm going to go into, but, I know how, aggressive Kirby historically is, and I love that most of the time, but, he said they're playing to win the game there at the end. That's why they did the, aggressive pass or whatever, and, my thought process is, shouldn't playing to win sometimes mean doing what's smart? In that case, running the clock down, not giving Ole Miss time because, Chambliss was running the defense ragged all night, making Houdini-type plays and just kind of, making everybody around him just look better, and he's just Heisman caliber. And so, my thought process, if you don't give him much time, I trust that tired defense a lot more in a shorter field situation like an overtime than I would, him having the opportunity with his standout wide receivers to take vertical shots to get that, stud kicker into field goal position to win the game. But overall, I like the fights in the team. I thought they played hard. Just, kind of some questionable calls here and there. And I think, kind of playing for the win could have meant something else in this outcome of the game.
It's a really interesting phone call, and Rodrigo, I'll come to you on what he has to say there. Obviously, it's a 1st and goal situation. On 1st down, Gunner runs, gets 5 yards. I forget what happens on 2nd down. On 3rd down, that's the pass attempt to Delp, which is incomplete. Now, I think different people are going to have different opinions, and I think a good number of opinions was valid. I should say a good number of opinions could be valid. But I remember turning to Connor Riley, who I was sitting next to in the press box, and I remember personally saying, this is to me a situation where Georgia can't do the basketball thing and play for the last shot, even with Ole Miss being hot on offense. I thought that Georgia needed to try to score, and if you left Ole Miss with some time, okay, so be it. Now, the trick is the Ole Miss kicker had already made a 55 and a 56-yard field goal, which I know obviously you were going to notice as the specialist that you are, but it didn't work, but I didn't have a problem with Georgia doing what it did there, but I also understand why that's going to be a huge topic of conversation. I totally get all of that. What's your reaction to that last sequence, Rodrigo?
Yeah, I think that, something that Coach Smart had mentioned when the question was presented to him in the presser, as we saw a little bit earlier in the show, is I think that they started off that possession doing the right things. I think that on 1st down, you want to run the ball. You want to force Ole Miss to use their timeouts because they only had 2 left at that point in the game. So, you want to make them use their timeouts so they don't have anything left if they do get the ball back. So you do want to run the ball at least 2 times on that possession, which we did. On 1st down, Gunner runs, gets 5 yards. We're inside the 5-yard line. On 2nd down, I believe we had a handoff to Chauncey Bowens that didn't really amount to anything. I think we basically got tackled at the line of scrimmage, or maybe it was a 1-yard loss. So we ended up with a 3rd and goal from about the 5 to 6 yard line. So I think that they did the right thing on 1st and 2nd down. You want to run the ball, make sure that you force Ole Miss to use the last of their 2 timeouts so they have nothing left. And then on 3rd down, I'm okay as you are with a pass attempt. I just think that maybe a different play call would have been a little bit more advantageous, because if you are going to throw the ball in that situation, I think that you do want to leave the opportunity for that play to end up in bounds and drain some more of the clock, because Georgia still had timeouts for themselves. So, you can call a play that leaves it in bounds, give yourself the opportunity to run off a little bit more time. I'm okay with, going for the win, as Coach Smart was saying. He wanted to go for the win, at least on that 3rd down play. Try and get a play that gives you a touchdown. And then if you don't get it, you kick the field goal, and then you play for overtime at that point when you hopefully only have about 18 seconds left in the game, as opposed to the, nearly a minute that they ended up having left. So, I do think that for the most part, that possession was handled correctly. I would have appreciated maybe a little bit different play call on that 3rd down. I know that, the broadcasters had mentioned earlier in that possession, you have to think about your playmaker or your player and not necessarily a play. And I think that in that instance on a 3rd and goal, if you're not going to run the ball, if you're going to put the ball up in the air, you have to look for Zachariah Branch in that situation, to get you the score, whether that be on a screen pass or whether that be on a jet sweep or, motion motioning him out of the backfield, on a swing route, just a high percentage throw that gets the ball in his hands quickly, inbounds, gives him an opportunity to potentially make a play in space. And if he doesn't get in the end zone, he stays in bounds. You run off the rest of the clock, run the clock down as far as you possibly can before you get that field goal to tie it up. And then you're probably playing for overtime at that point, and you have a potentially different situation in overtime. Now, one area where I may disagree with our caller, where he said he might feel better about our defense's chances in overtime because they're tired. If Ole Miss was able to move the ball on you as consistently as they did with 75-yard fields up until that point in the game, what makes you think that the defense is going to have an easier time stopping them when Ole Miss only has to go 25 yards? Or even worse, you get into a 2-point play shootout as we saw against Georgia Tech last year. I don't really feel good about our defense's chances if we get to that point in overtime where we're trying to get 2-point stops every other possession. So, I appreciate that you at least took the aggressive shot on third down. Would have liked to see it go a different way in terms of the play call, but I think that for the most part, that possession was still handled the right way.
Kirby Smart will revisit what he said about this in a moment. Let me give you a chance, though, before we say goodbye to you. Maybe our last chance to hear from you for a little while. So if you want to wrap up the season from your perspective or this game, the stage is yours to give us some parting thoughts here.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on this season. I've always wanted to get into the broadcast space whenever I get done playing. Hopefully, I'm not done playing professional football just yet, but whenever that time does come, broadcasting has always been something that I have, wanted to do, and so I am so thankful to DawgNation for giving me the opportunity to do that this season. It's been a great season, and I feel like I've been so much more invested in the Dogs this season than I have been basically every year since the 2020 season, which was my first year out after I graduated. I've been so invested in this team this year, following them so closely week in and week out, watching every minute of every game. It's just been a really rewarding experience to see all the success that this team has had, to see all these players come through in clutch moments as they have, all the way up to, through this point in the season. I think back to the Tennessee game when we had that 4th down conversion in the end zone to London Humphreys, and the 2-point conversion to tie the game and to send that game to overtime. Just moments like that all throughout the season, are going to stick with me for a long time. This has just been an incredible season. It's been a great season to look at the game from a different perspective, to look at it not only as a former player, but also as an analyst this season. It's been a really different experience, but also a very rewarding experience. So I'm just so thankful to DawgNation, so thankful to UBA for having me on your show every weekend. Thankful to Kaylee for having me on with the pregame show as well. You guys have been great to me, allowing me to, dip my toes in and just have this first experience with, with broadcasting, and hopefully it's something I can continue to do in the future. But I'm so thankful for this opportunity, thankful to get to talk football with you, and, hopefully there will be brighter days for the Dogs to come. I'm so proud of this team for all the work they've done this season. Obviously, another defeat in the Sugar Bowl isn't going to sit right with me for a long time. I really wish that this team could have done more, because we have seen them do some great things this year, and I really do think this team had the right makeup of guys to be able to go all the way. Ultimately, it just wasn't in the cards, but I'm still so proud of this team and so thankful for the opportunity that you guys have given me to do this season.
Rodrigo, I think you've done a great job. I've loved your insight. Obviously, our audience has loved you, and we were great members of your career, and obviously have enjoyed getting to know you better on this post-game show each and every week. So hopefully we get a chance to talk soon, but your analysis on this post-game show this season has been outstanding. So thank you so much, and what is it, almost 1 o'clock in the morning there in Georgia, or, getting closer back home. So enjoy the night, Rodrigo. Happy New Year, and we'll look forward to a chance to speak to you again very soon on hopefully much happier circumstances in the near future.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. Happy New Year, and go Dogs.
Happy New Year, go Dogs indeed. We'll keep our conversation going here. The topic a moment ago, the caller bringing up the decision there on third down, the pass attempt to Oscar Delp right here in this end zone. That's incomplete. Georgia trying to be aggressive there, knowing would give the ball back to Ole Miss, at least run the risk of giving the ball back to Ole Miss. Kirby Smart a moment ago laid out his thought process on that particular play. Let's hear Kirby Smart on this hot topic.
So we're number 1 or 2 in the country in red zone offense, right? Scoring TDs. What do we do well? We run it. That's what we do well. We run it down there really well. It's not very far you get to throw it. We've been really, really good at running and doing it. And by doing that, you also force them to call timeout, assuming they stop you. If they don't stop us, then They got time on the clock to go out there and run their 2-minute offense and try to score back. They burnt 2 timeouts. They were out of timeouts. And the decision was what he talked about. Do we run it on third and just play for a tie? Because it's hard to run the ball in from 3rd and 3, or I don't know what yard line we were on. I felt like it was 3, 3.5, 2, like a 2-point play. And I like the call. I like the play. And I like going to win the game. Because I felt like if we scored there and we kicked it, we're up. And they got to score a touchdown to beat us. And I'm like, I'll take that every time with our defense in 2 minutes. So I like the plays there. I mean, if we run it and don't get it, then I'm sitting there playing for a tie, and I don't love that, or playing for overtime.
So that's the thought process, That's the thought process that Kirby Smart expresses a moment ago. We'll have more from Kirby Smart perhaps throughout our show, and of course in its entirety on the DawgNation YouTube page. I'm also going to bring in Jeff Sentell here in a minute too. Let's get the phone calls and keep them going here right now. Let's check in on Trinity and Marietta. Trinity, you're next up on our DawgNation post-game call-in show. Georgia loses a very disappointing game here, concluding the season in a way that few of us would have perhaps expected. Trinity, why don't you react to it with us here right now?
Yeah, I'm like, this was a very tough game to watch. I'm really frustrated. So, like, pretty much every caller and everybody's takes, Hot Rod, your takes, everybody has pretty much the same takes tonight. I want to add that this game seems so eerily to the Alabama versus Texas A&M game with like Johnny Manziel, and Chambliss played that Johnny Manziel perfectly tonight. Georgia, we couldn't if we didn't have a Jalen Walker or like a Michael Williams or like a Lorenzo Carter that is a really great pass rusher, we were not going to get to him. Tonight's loss is really on Bobo. I love Bobo, and of course there's Georgia fans tonight that are trying to call for this man's job, which is not warranted. He called a very horrible game. He has to own up to that. But he called a great season. It's just this game tonight was a culmination of our poor starts all year. And it's so frustrating watching us not do what our like identity that we normally do, run the ball up the middle. We did not pass to our tight ends, which I don't understand why that wasn't part of the game plan. Like, that's just ludicrous to me. You only target Delp twice, one for like a first down, or one that was like for a first down, and then later in the game, I think you maybe targeted maybe one more time. You didn't get Lawson Lucky involved until that trick play. You didn't get Ethan Barber. You didn't get I can't think of our other young tight ends, but Ole Miss could not guard us. Ole Miss did not show the ability to like guard our tight ends. We didn't get Dylan Bell involved. Like, we could have did. There were just so many more routes and more play calls that we could have did. It just seemed so conservative and flat. Like, why would you run Josh? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I appreciate the phone call, Trinity. I think you're bringing up a lot of good points, and I'll bring Jeff Sentell on this. That I think for me, and one of the things that Trinity's talking about there is obviously a pretty frustrating game for Georgia on offense after it builds the 21-12 lead. You know, it's up. You know, it scored 21 points. It's got a lead. There were large portions of the first half when it seemed like Georgia was going to be able to control clock, limit the possessions, and keep this from being the chaotic game it had been when these two teams played in October. But at a certain point, the run game just stopped. The faucet got turned off, and some of it was Ole Miss winning battles up front in a way that it had not before. I think Ole Miss probably creeping up, bodies towards the line of scrimmage maybe too, daring Georgia to do something over its head. And today, Georgia just didn't have that counterpunch. I keep coming back to 5 straight drives. It included 2 threes and out, a missed field goal. You had to fake a punt to keep a drive alive that ultimately results in a field goal. And then you had the whatever goofy stuff trying to copy what Marcus Freeman did a year ago. Over the course of that span, that was the time that Trinidad Chambliss needed to get hot. The Ole Miss offense took advantage of, I think, the Georgia defense, probably a little bit gassed. And that's it. That's the game. And what seemed like was heading towards a Georgia win, not in dominant fashion, but a game in which it seemed like Georgia had control of. That control slipped away, and Georgia didn't do anything offensively to thwart that momentum.
There's a lot of things, Brandon. I know you've probably done some really good autopsy on this loss. I'm sure you probably grabbed the quote of Kirby Smart's sound of him discussing what happened on that fourth down play where it was just a botch when with they weren't set, they weren't ready. Like Monroe Freeling looked on the play like he's like, what's going on, that sort of thing. Kirby addressed that in the post game. Brandon, I know the quick thing is to go down to first and goal at the 2. Georgia's down 3. There's a human element here to me in terms of we're aware that Georgia's best running back was out at that point.
We actually just saw Nate Frazier walk by a moment ago. He was in a boot, to give you an idea of how banged up he was at the end of this game.
Yeah, that's what made me kind of bring that up first and foremost there, Brandon, is we see him probably taking about 6 minutes to traverse this field, the width of this field in a boot. And you can easily say first and goal to 2. Got to punch that in. Got to keep running it in. Maybe bleed off some more clock while you're doing it rather than throwing that pass to Oscar Delp. But you also got to remember there that Georgia's trying to do that with its best running back no longer in the game. So that's one of those things you got to think about. Oh, they got to do this, they got to do that. Brendan, I thought there were some really aggressive things happening in this game. The Riverboat Gambler with Kirby Smart, that's when they went up 10, and somehow Georgia summoned up the momentum to tie this football game. I thought K.J. Bolden had something pretty good to say afterward. He said, man, this hurts. Just got to take it like a man. That's what Kirby Smart told him. He's like, yeah, take this one like a man. This game to me, Brandon, unraveled at the end, kind of like the Georgia-Ole Miss game in Sanford Stadium. Except those stops did not come from Trinidad Chambliss at the end. I thought Trinidad Chambliss and Kawan Lacey were the best 2 players on the field tonight. Georgia somehow, with this great intestinal fortitude in the way they play, they never give up, program culture, they find a way to get a scoop and score when they're getting outgained to kind of keep the margin ahead for a little bit. But then in the end, you see Georgia – everybody, I don't know how you felt, but when I saw that and Trinidad Chambliss had 56 seconds left on the clock to get his team into field goal range with that young man, the kicker from Ole Miss today, hitting them from about Mediaire or Shreveport. That's how strong his leg was. That was really tough.
We'll get back to the phones here. We're going to run through as many as we can. By the way, to give you an idea how much things changed for Georgia after a lot of success, at least seemingly running the ball in the first half, just 39 rushing yards in the second half. Some of that's going to be sack yardage lost, I believe, but still it tells the tale of what Georgia was not able to do in the final 2 quarters the way that it did in the early stage of this game, where even if it wasn't scoring a million points, it was really keeping the Ole Miss offense on the sideline. This is a game that was played at Georgia's pace until it wasn't. Before we go back to phones, let me also give a shout-out to our friends at the UGA bookstore. I love them. The shirt I have on underneath my DawgNation pullover is a shirt from the UGA bookstore. I'm proud to wear my Georgia gear in wins and losses and everything in between. Honestly, I thought the Georgia fans were the best dressed in New Orleans this week, and that's saying a lot given how try-hard the Ole Miss fans are. But I thought the Georgia fans looked great. And obviously a lot of that great apparel comes from the UGA bookstore. So this season may come to an end, but we're not ever going to stop wearing that Georgia gear, the likes of which you get the UGA bookstore. I'm talking about Peter Millar, Arnold Reserve, Vineyard Vines, Tommy Bahama, Southern Tide, Stuart Simmons, all kinds of really cool apparel makers, the Nike coaches gear, all of that at the UGA bookstore. If you can't be there in Athens, you can shop online, UGAbookstore.com. You can get that today. All right, let's go back to the phones here for a moment. Let's try Damien in Alabama. Damien, you're next up on our DawgNation postgame call-in show. Damien, give us your thoughts here as Georgia loses a game that, boy, it's going to sting for a little while here. This was a real opportunity, and it seems like Georgia's probably squandered it. What's your reaction to it?
First, I'd like to say Happy New Year to all the DawgNation fans out there. I definitely want to say I've been one of the ones that have been kind of critical of Mike Bobo play calling throughout the whole year. Yes, our offense we have had one of the top offenses as far as points per game, but like we seen today, a lot of inconsistency with the play calling. One moment we run the ball all the way down, then the next moment we'll stop running, we'll pass it, constantly putting ourselves in 2nd and 10, 3rd and 8. and that's not Georgia football. Georgia football, we're normally getting into them manageable third downs to make the play calling even more easier to for our players to better execute the play. I did not agree with, of course, and I know everybody said about that third down call to for the pass to Oscar Dell. I'm like this. We've been throwing the ball screen passes all year. That was the perfect time for a screen pass, especially to Zachariah Branch. At that point, you got to get your playmakers the ball. Like many callers have said, we did not try to feature the tight ends at all. Dylan Bell did not get featured at all. Maybe had one target to Noah Thomas. The play calling was so counterplay. We'll switch it to the opposite side. Counterplay. Then we wonder why our receivers not getting open. If we're running curls and flats, every route concept, they're not going to get open. So I think moving forward, Kirby, the offensive staff, the defensive staff, we got to do a lot of soul searching on, Georgia, we have this culture and that we hard-nosed and we resilient, we grind it out. But Georgia is too talented. Most time, top 3 as far as signing recruit class in the nation almost every year. We got too many talented players for us to be in these type situations too many times. We're probably one of the most talented teams in all college football.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, Damien. I appreciate the phone call. I want to let Jeff Sentell respond to what you're saying. So Damien says, hey, we're the most, talented team in college football, too much talent to let that happen. And while I agree with Damien, and I do, I'll also say this, Jeff, today's the kind of day in which, for lack of a better way of saying it, $1 million player would have changed a lot for Georgia. $1 million player could have gotten open to give Georgia a chance to break a long drought offensively where it's not doing anything. When Trinidad Chambliss, who I don't know if he makes $1 million or not, but given how he's played right now, he's going to make $1 million somewhere next year, NFL or whatever else. Maybe $1 million player gets him on the ground a couple of those times when he's scrambling for his life. Georgia's cornerbacks are having to run 100 miles, trying to keep up with wide receivers because the play's staying alive for 10, 15 seconds, it felt like, 10 seconds at least. $1 million player maybe gets Trinidad Chambliss on the ground. This is a Georgia team that's loaded with talent. I love all these players. Every Georgia fan does. But some of the why they doing this and why they doing that, I think some of this traces back to, is there $1 million player on that football field? And in 2026, which is the year we're in now, can you win a national championship without the $1 million player?
Well, I think I'm still above the accord. I don't know how you feel. I think Georgia will probably be top 1, top 2, top 3 in the country next year preseason with all the people they have coming back. I feel like they have a lot of the horses coming back to do so. But you were talking about, I agree with the part where you said they needed $1 million play on defense to get this quarterback on the ground, because the time he had, Kirby Smart was consoling DeMello Jones after the game, but there's a lot of these plays he made where you can't cover a receiver for 6-7 seconds like he's doing. It felt to me a lot like C.J. Stroud in a lot of games. It felt to me like Joe Burrow in a lot of games. It felt to me like, again, Brandon, it's the same poison pill. It is a hot quarterback that torches a lot of the great things Georgia's doing right now. And I think, when you look at what Georgia needs, I don't know if tonight's the time for it, but you got to sit there and wonder who's going pro, who's going to go in the portal. I think Georgia's going to have to find some more receivers, and that's probably what you're speaking to right there in terms of replacing guys like Colby Young, Zachariah Branch. But
can we park on that for a second?
Yeah.
Okay, because what you just said a moment ago was, you say, okay, you need more receivers, which I totally agree with. But a moment ago you said, hey, I definitely think they could have used that $1 million player on defense. I don't want to read in what you're saying, but I would say the need was equal for that on offense. I love Zachariah Branch, but you can't throw to Branch every single time. At one point in time in the press box, I was like, they got to turn this into Auburn 2023 and just feed Branch over and over and over again. But ultimately, you're not going to be able to do that with a smaller body player than you could with, like, say, a Brock Bowers. But to my eyes, and I'm not trying to be overly critical, I'm really not. We're trying to have a balanced, nuanced discussion. There were long stretches tonight where nobody was getting open. And some of those shots that Gunner was taking that were absolute just car crashes. Some of that was just trying to hold on to the ball as long as he could to see if somebody could get open. So I felt like the absence of dynamic playmaker getting Chambliss to the ground, I thought that was equally absent on offense, where when the running game stopped working, nobody was getting open.
Yeah, a couple things. Zachariah Branch, for the first time all season, did catch some downfield balls a little bit, especially that one in the corner. They started out the game, got behind the sticks a little bit by trying a deep ball. Brandon, the one thing that's missing for me in this game is that Georgia didn't access its tight ends the way it did in the first game. You didn't see a lot of big shots with the tight ends and moving the chains. I think a lot of the problems, Brandon, were they had problems with interior pass protection. They were getting on Gunner a lot, and I'm sure you've had your own vomit session a little bit in terms of talking about the targeting calls that go towards Georgia, and then Gunner gets basically annihilated, and they don't even stop to think about it at all. I mean,
they're just making it up as they go along.
I mean, the whole targeting rule, that's something we need to just the penalties, I think, are so very severe right now, Brandon, because look at it. It takes Ja'Cory Thomas off the game, and that was one of Georgia's most experienced remaining healthy defensive backs in this football game.
Yeah, Rodrigo and I were talking about this a moment ago. You had a stretch of this game. Now, eventually, KJ comes back in, but you had Adrian Maddox and Zion Branch as your safeties. Now, Zion almost made the play of the season. He dislodged that football late in the game that would have been a heroic thing had Georgia been able to finish this off. So, to my eyes, it seemed like Zion was playing pretty well. And people, I think, like Adrian Maddox, but that's not your starting safeties. That's what you were down to, though, because of, what I thought was a pretty silly call against Thomas, and obviously KJ, who got briefly banged up, although was able to come back in.
I think it really hurts when you don't have Frazier. He's one of those difference maker type guys, Brandon. There were a couple plays Gunner made today where he had to hitch up the ball and then move downfield and kind of work a way to get a Colby Young open, to get a Cash Jones open, where these were not scripted plays. These were kind of the
I'll pause on you again because our producer, Jay Black, was mentioning, to give you an idea of how Georgia was just craving somebody to do something. Nate Frazier and Cash Jones, who you just mentioned, that was Georgia's second and third leading receiver today.
I mean, and again, Brandon, how they have to strain for everything. They run a fake punt with a freshman wide receiver. They throw the ball, and that's how they summon up enough to get down the field and get to a field goal. I mean, it just became too hard, Brandon. Even that last drive when Georgia gets they convert a 4th and 9 to Zachariah Branch. Then they get a flag here, a flag there, and they find themselves at that fortunate situation with 1st and goal at the 2. It just became so hard for them to just bleed Ole Miss down the field. And it's one of those games, Brandon, you look at it, there's a lot of games that could have went like this, man. It felt like, remember the Tennessee game when they had that late kick? Tennessee misses the field goal. And that's one of those games where when Georgia was trying to figure out a way how to win, that it could have went the other way. At this time, Ole Miss's kicker did not miss.
Yeah, exactly. 2 big, booming field goals from him, and then the game winner after that. And you're right, a reversal of fortune, what Georgia's gotten the benefit of earlier this year. Let's go to Riley in Monroe. Riley, you're next up on our DawgNation Postgame call-in show. Riley, not the conversation we wanted to be having, but your opinion's valuable to us, so share your thoughts on a Georgia loss to Ole Miss that brings the 2025 season to an end on the first night of 2026.
Happy New Year to y'all guys. Not the way we wanted to start.
Happy New Year to you.
Just want to go back to the play calling and stuff. Was you get big stop on 4th down. You start off the second half, play conservatively, and I also want to go to Noah Thomas missing, Dylan Bell missing, just not getting the ball to the playmakers that have been good for us all season in big games.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the phone call, and yeah, there was some of that. Obviously, Dylan almost had a chance for one of those halfback option type throws that he's famous for, and Thomas was targeted, I think, one time that I can remember. Maybe it was more than that, but I believe he was targeted the one time. But I am going to put something on those guys a little bit. And listen, I appreciate the phone call. I think anything's fair game. We don't have blasphemy laws here. You want to, talk about a Bobo, you want to talk about a whatever. I think it's all fair game, but sometimes I gotta have my receiver get open. Zachariah Branch knows how to do it. Zachariah knows how to create space for himself, and Georgia just needs more of that. They just do. And in this day and age, you know how you get more of that? You pay for it. And we did a very similar conversation a year ago when the season on this same dadgum field. I'm like the last caller a couple of minutes ago. I'm sort of tired of coming to New Orleans. I gotta be honest with you. I may be done with this place for a while. But we had the same conversation about, boy, you got to spin big on these premium positions. There may not be another way to do it. Jeff, I love everything about the way that Georgia goes about its business. I really do. I think it plays the game the right way, and I genuinely believe that. But, man, a dynamic playmaker, the likes of which that you spend big dollars on, would have made a huge difference here tonight.
Brandon, I don't know if it's this symmetry here makes sense, but I think the pain that DawgNation's going through might. You know how a certain Atlanta sports franchise was built to win the regular season, was built and stacked up together to win division titles, but then when it got to the elite postseason tournament, they didn't have enough of those special players in those big-time moments because maybe the other team had 3 really good starters. I think when you get to this level, to these games specifically, you need a guy that just decides, I'm going to take over this football game, much like Trinidad Chambliss did tonight, much like we've seen in a lot of instances. Who's that guy that scares the other side? Now, some of these guys will be going into the portal. We just wonder about Georgia's financial appetite for those types of players. I mean, I can see it through your mind. You're dreaming up an unguardable wide receiver. You saw how Georgia really was trying so hard to get something with Talon Taylor because he was the guy that maybe they thought could give them a spark with a downfield shot. You just need more of those playmakers on offense.
Yeah, I want to be clear about this, and then we're going to get back to the phones. I'm not trying to, and I think you understand this, I'm not trying to have a fantasy land discussion. I'm not trying to be Cody Campbell. I'm not trying to get to Georgia be Los Angeles Dodgers. I'm not talking about just money whipping everybody. But I do know that there is a theoretical lid that Georgia has on certain kinds of compensation. At least that's the sense that I get here a little bit. And one side of the ball or the other, they may just have to break the bank at some point in time. For the edge rusher, for the dynamic receiver, for something, they may just have to punch through a ceiling that they haven't been willing to go through to make the Notre Dame game go differently, the Ole Miss game this year go differently. There may come a point when they have to say, we are going to stack dollars for a couple of guys in a way we have not before. I'm going to keep coming back to that. Just maybe what this team is missing.
I mean, Brandon, one of the things, I think most people would agree that, Gunner checks almost every box. He's a warrior. He's gutsy. He's as tough as it ever gets. He's improvisational. He's got the clutch gene. He showed it over and over. You got to get that guy some help, whether it's a guy he can just chuck it up to and that guy's going to make a play, or it's a guy at running back where he can just hand it off, like when Trinidad Chambliss had to summon up some more magic or recharge the batteries. He could give the ball to Kejuan Lacey and he could make it go. Brandon, I thought there were several plays, especially when Frazier went out. They tried to hand the ball to Josh McCrary, and it was another ball out wide, and that is not his call.
I said the same thing.
That is not his play. That is not his call. And you just wonder, like, if Georgia's going to win and die, and they're going to go down swinging, you want it in a play call where you got the ball in the guy's hands. Brandon, there's a lot of times when Zachariah Branch was open that he didn't even get fed tonight because it looked like they couldn't guard him. It looked like that they couldn't guard Colby Young, that poor defensive back that was trying to guard him that got like 4 flags. He was about 4 years younger and about 4 inches shorter than Colby Young. They just need more of those difference makers because it's the story of the season, Brandon. The offense had to kind of pick up the pieces a little bit when the defense fell apart in key spots.
Okay, so if you're on hold, I know it's late. Stay right where you are. We want to hear from you. I need 60 seconds, though, from you right now. Got to thank a couple of our sponsors. It's been a great season. I know it obviously, disappointing conclusion, but we've had a lot of fun this year watching these dogs and talking to you about them on this DawgNation Postgame show. It's terrific sponsors that have helped us do that. So let me have 1 minute to thank a couple of them, and then we'll jump right back into your phone calls after that. 1 minute. If you're on hold, stay where you are. If you still want to join us, we'll squeeze in a few more. 678-645-DAWG. That's DAWG. 678-645-DAWG. Click the link. Join us live there. We'll react tonight to a Georgia loss that is obviously very disappointing and going to lead to some questions about where does Georgia go from here. We'll do our part to try to figure that out, and we're going to use your voice to help us do it 1 minute from right now after a quick timeout.
I get it. We all want to do our research online before buying anything.
But if you're in the market for a hot tub,
trust me, you'll be glad you came into Georgia Spa Company to see their inventory in person.
You just got to get your hands on them, see them, envision which model will fit your home and your lifestyle best. Talk to one of our consultants who, I promise you, will bring up considerations you never thought to consider. I'd also recommend taking a test soak.
So come on into Georgia Spa Company. I promise you'll be glad you did.
Big games deserve big meals, so let Cercheros make it happen. It's friendly Tex-Mex, served fresh every day. Cercheros Catering can handle the crowd, so it's perfect for your tailgate or watch party. Order online, pickup, or delivery. Cercheros is Georgia grown with over 30 locations throughout the state, bringing you fresh Mex, bowls, burritos, tacos, and more, with over 25 fresh toppings, customizable, just the way you like it. So find a location near you at Cercheros.com. That's Cercheros.com.
If you're thirsting for It's Only Tuesday, that meeting should have been an email, and really need something to go your way level of refreshment, we definitely have that. When you're feeling the heat, Circle K makes your day.
This is DawgNation Postgame, brought to you by Cercheros, Georgia Spa Company, Circle K, and the UGA Bookstore.
All right, it's very late here on I almost said Saturday night, but it's actually a Thursday night turning into Friday morning. It's Brandon Adams, Jeff Sentell hanging out right now as part of our DawgNation Postgame call-in show. We're going to do a few final thoughts here, give people a chance to react, and then we'll obviously wake up tomorrow morning and do more of this on DawgNation Daily. So, Jeff, if you don't mind, let's jump back in a couple of phone calls. Let's give people a chance to have their say, and then we'll get ready to eventually bring this thing to a close here. Let me go to Ryan in Alabama. Ryan, you're next up on our DawgNation Postgame call-in show. Ryan, give us your thoughts here tonight. Do we have Ryan here right now?
BA.
Hey, Ryan, go ahead.
Hey, go Dogs. Thanks for having me on, BA. A couple of points I wanted to hit. A lot of them have been hit from the other viewers. What this game really boiled down to was it could have been won in the last 2 minutes, like we've been talking about for the last couple of minutes here. Why are we not sticking to the bread and butter? I mean, UGA is a run-heavy offense. We lacked offensive production for the majority of the game. You know, we could beat the drum about that. We could beat the drum about the lack of defensive stops, the inability to put pressure on the quarterback. But I really do think that the loss boils back down to coaching. When you get punched in the face, you revert to the level of your training is the quote. And these guys are coached by Coach Smart, Coach Bobo, and the play calling tonight was subpar at best. So, I mean, if we could talk a little bit more about the subpar play calling, that'd be great.
Ryan, I appreciate the phone call talking about what he describes as subpar play calling, and I do get that, and I think it is a fair conversation to have. In particular, what he's referencing is going away from the running game. And, Ryan, you have every right to say this is not a satisfactory answer, and I'm fine with it. I think there's more than one valid opinion on this, but my personal belief is the running game stopped working. And I am left with the question of, well, when Nate got off to the fast start, when Georgia was controlling this, you know, we saw some Ole Miss guys up front start to win their individual battles. Maybe they're creeping more guys to the line of scrimmage, but I think that Georgia had to go away from the run because it was not working. And that's where I go back to when you needed somebody in the passing game to give you that counterpunch. They just didn't, other than Zachariah Branch, who we're going to be praising, they just didn't do it. So I get the frustration, but I also think there was a reason for some of those play calling, coaching decisions. Ole Miss just bowed its back and said, you're getting running stuff against us in the first half, but we're about to shut that down, and then they did.
You know, Brandon, I don't want to say this, but, like, I feel like this is similar as the last time when Georgia played here in the Superdome. Remember how Georgia's best option or their second best option for a playmaker was Cash Jones? And that was this way tonight. He was your third leading receiver in the game. Man, he had one great drive. He got Georgia down to the 2. But just the thing that's different here, and Cash Jones is a preferred walk. Now, he is a great Georgia Bulldog. He is summoning up every ounce of effort he can to help Georgia win. And this is not dogging anybody out. But I think when you have to go down that part of your offense to try to find a guy – that is maximizing every bit of his ability. He doesn't have NFL this. He doesn't have NFL that. It gets a little sticky. And what I mean by sticky is it just gets really hard. That's not a guy defenses are going to account for. They have to worry about. That's not a guy that's going to beat defensive scheme and shifts over to his side, Brandon. There's a lot here about and I don't know how you feel. This is how I feel. I don't think Georgia tried all it could. It mustered all it could. I don't think Georgia was the better team tonight. I just don't.
9 tackles for loss of the Ole Miss defense. That's part of why Georgia stopped running the ball, because Ole Miss was getting into the backfield against Georgia, and for a portion also had Gunnar Stockton running for his life too. Now Zachariah Branch did everything he could to stop that and to give Georgia a chance to win this game. We had an interesting quote from Zachariah after the game, looking at a Georgia team that he stepped in, became a very big part of this year in 2025, how he thinks this Georgia team will be remembered, what their legacy will be. This is what Zachariah Branch said about that a moment ago.
Yeah, man, we are a special team. We did a lot of things that, some teams didn't get a chance to do. Back-to-back SEC championship champions. And, I guess nobody's beat Alabama in the SEC championship, they said. So, we did a lot of historic things, man. A lot of guys, put their life on the line, put their bodies on the line, most importantly to get back for these games, like Kobe, like, Ethan Barbour and things like that, to, really strain their bodies to try to get back for the team. It's something that, it should be remembered for sure. A lot of those guys didn't have to do that. They could have just made sure they took the safe route and just, made sure their bodies were straight and things like that. But they want to play for this team, and they want to go out there for this team. So this team is a team that, has team camaraderie, and we really love each other, a true bond. So I feel like that's something important that a team has to have in order to win games, and I feel like this team should be remembered for that.
I'm glad he mentions Colby Young there, because I thought the way in which Colby fought back down the field is commendable. And we're talking about guys trying to make plays. My gosh, Colby makes the diving reception on the third down, the first down. Great catch. Other moments too where, Colby Young, we probably haven't talked about him enough tonight, but I'm glad Zachariah mentions him. I thought that Colby really did he gave far more than he had any of us had any right to expect him to coming off the injury. That's a real warrior. You'd love to have had him for a full season. I'd be curious to know how close to 100% healthy he was tonight, but boy, he gave Georgia every ounce that he had. So as we're talking about, some bright spots, some silver linings, some things like that, Georgia's had a couple of special players in that wide receiver room. Zachariah Branch, who was just speaking, Colby Young, one of the guys he was speaking about. I'm going to remember both those guys fondly. It certainly appears that, in the case of Colby Young, it definitely is. In the case of Branch, it probably is. I'm going to remember both those guys fondly for what they brought to Georgia.
Kobe Young afterwards said he's never going to take the chance to play with this team for granted, to get out there and take it for granted. Man, he's one of those guys you wish that could have put more memories up in his Georgia career, because it always seems like he was overcoming something or, always coming back from something. Brendan, I got to tell one story that's on my mind. And, as well as Trinidad Chambliss played tonight, I'm sure he should get every MVP award out of this game. I don't know if you're aware of this, but at the end of the game, after that, Georgia tried to go Stanford Cal with the band, that part of the game. Trinidad Chambliss runs across the sideline.
Let's show, Jeff, as you talk about it, we'll show people video on the screen. So tell us the story and what people can see the video for themselves.
So, Trinidad Chambliss just won a very big football game for Ole Miss. This is uncharted territory for them. And he made a point to basically beeline down the sideline. In the midst of all his celebration, he could have been with his team. He found Gunnar Stockton. He dapped him up. He said he appreciated the competitiveness. They had a real moment there, Brandon. And I know it stings. It hates to lose, and sometimes we find ourselves spiraling through all this conjecture to make sense of it all. That's a really good football player right there that just really did something incredible. in a moment like this, then nobody would expect him to do that.
Let's get a couple more phone calls before we get ready to say goodnight on what is a very late one for us here. Rob's in Athens. Rob, you're next up on our DawgNation Postgame call-in show. Rob, a lot of disappointment tonight, trying to make sense of what happened. React with us to Georgia letting one get away, had a lead against Ole Miss, a team they'd already beaten, and now the Rebels will bring the Georgia season to an end. What was your reaction to what you saw?
Are you talking to me? Yes, you are. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I sure am. I sure can.
Okay,
Sure
this is
can.
Texas Dawg. I go by Texas Dawg in the chat.
Hey, Texas.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
First, I want to say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you and all Dawg Nation. And second, I want to take a breath.
Well, Texas Dog, before you make Texas Dog, before you
make
make your point too, and I'm gonna let you.
Okay,
I'm going to let you say everything you want to say, but I also want to say congratulations to you because I know you reached out to us on social media to let us know that you've been battling cancer and you got a great diagnosis recently. It sounds like you've had a real piece of good news coming your way. So obviously there are some things in life bigger than football. So we'll let you react to this game here in a moment, but I just wanted to let you know on behalf of everybody at DawgNation how happy we are for some good health news that you got the other day.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I just want to take a breath and make sure I keep this family friendly. But I don't understand how, Nate Frazier had 50 yards rushing in the first half and how he only ended with 88 yards. Now, I've heard things said about the running game wasn't working. Well, we never even did play action, okay? They never faked that run and did play action, in my opinion. They also didn't, after watching maybe not today's games because they had a game themselves, but at least last night's game, Miami and Ohio State, that bubble screen that Miami picked off for a pick six. Okay, that's something that we use a lot with Zachariah Branch. Okay, well, people are starting to jump on that thing. Why not fake that and throw it down the field? I just thought the play calling in general, and I've been a Bobo. I've watched many years. Bobo, not Bobo. I've watched a lot of play calling, and I've said the same things. Then when I really started watching and rewatching games, the play calling has been there all year long until tonight. All of a sudden, I don't understand why they didn't just, do things simplified. It's disappointing to me that I had to sit here and like you said, I've got problems, and I got good news with the surgery and everything like that. But the quality of life that I live right now is not very good. I don't know if I ever be able to go to another Bulldog game in my recovery because of what I got to go through. But that's beside the point. I've been so disappointed in the play calling. It's not even funny. It just turns my stomach. I've heard things like also earlier, a few minutes ago, I heard things about buying players or certain positions and this and that. Did anybody not watch the Indiana-Alabama game? Indiana's full of a few four stars, no 5 stars, 3 stars, and a bunch of no stars, and they're kicking everybody's rear end. So to me, this is a total coaching issue. I don't know if it's just Kirby, the whole coaching staff, or whatever, but whatever they did for tonight, the prep might have been good. They didn't look rusty, but the game plan blew. And that's pretty much all I had to say. I mean, I've been a Georgia Bulldog fan since 1974 when we were driving through Georgia on our way to Miami when I was 4 years old. And we stopped at a store. My dad brought me 2 stickers, a Georgia Bulldog and a Georgia Tech Yellow Jacket sticker. I fell in love with Georgia at that point. I've been away from here. I grew up here, and now I'm back. And I love it here. I love making the move here. Even if I can't go to a game again because of my health, I'm happy to be here, and I love it. But I don't know. it just pains me to see what I saw tonight. I just thought they left.
I think it's fair.
They left so many opportunities on the table, play calling wise. I mean, they're down there and the number one offense in the country and scoring red zone touchdowns, and they can't put it in from the 3-yard line. That just blows my mind. I mean, all these plays they've got.
No, I think it's fair. Hey,
I'm sorry.
Texas, let me let Jeff respond to what you're saying, but no, you're great, Texas Dawg. I appreciate you. I think you bring up a lot of really good points, and obviously you've earned the right to say your piece. So we appreciate you being on the show tonight.
Thank you very much. I don't want to be one of those Bulldog fans that sound like a whiner or anything like that. I don't know. I just call it like I see it, and I realize now that there's not much time in life. It goes by fast in the blink of an eye. And you know what? Sometimes you just got to say what you got to say, and I'm sorry.
No, you're great. Texas Dawg, we appreciate you. We love the fact you got some good news of the day, and it sounds like you're still fighting some courageous battles. We appreciate that, and I'll tell you right now, this is why I love SEC football. This is why I love Georgia football, because, you know, guys like that who've got a lot going on, and yet, man, they still love their team. They want to support their team, and frankly, when their team doesn't win, they're going to come on here and let us know what they think about it. I think you got every right to do that, and no better job for me than to give a platform for really, really good Georgia fans who have just put their heart and soul into Georgia football, as you say, going back to the 1970s. You deserve your chance to say your piece, and that's what our guy Texas Dawg does right there. And, Jeff, I do think it's an interesting narrative for Georgia to kind of tie into what Texas Dawg was saying. This is a year in which Mike Bobo emerged as a Broyles Award finalist, in which Kirby Smart got a chance to do a couple of see I told you so's with press conferences, whether it be with some of the stuff related to Glenn Schumann, some of the stuff related to Mike Bobo. But it is interesting that this season's going to end with a reminder of some of the things that Georgia fans had questions about throughout the year. Look, you said earlier that you thought Ole Miss outplayed Georgia tonight. It clearly did. But Ole Miss is not supposed to be a better team than Georgia. This is Pete Golding's second game ever as coach. The quarterback is some guy they dragged out of Division II, wherever. This is not supposed to be a better team than Georgia. The fact that Georgia left the door open for Ole Miss to come in here and take it, and to the Rebels' credit, that's what they did. We're not going to shortchange what they did. We're really not. But the fact that Georgia allowed that to happen, how does that point back to anything other than somehow the game plan had to be better? You know, when you were physically dominated that team to begin with, but you couldn't finish stepping on their throat, you couldn't throw the knockout punch that put them away. I think the fans that are putting that back towards coaching, even if I'm nitpicking here and there and saying, well, what about this, what about that, I'm going to do some of that. But the overarching theme was this was a squandered opportunity. Georgia was playing tonight as the better team against a team that had already beaten, and they let it get away. And whether it's Texas Dawg or anybody else, if there are Georgia fans who are unhappy with the game plan that resulted in that outcome, I can't be mad at them for feeling that way.
I think the worst parts of it, and I'm glad the perspective that Texas Dawg brings here about, you know, what he's going through with his life off this great football platform or whatever, Brandon. But I think you've got Pete Golden, who had never coached in a game where Ole Miss had trailed. He's in the playoffs against Kirby Smart, who's the most successful playoff coach active right now. For this roster, which is an inferior roster to Georgia's, to find a way for them to beat Georgia tonight, it's daunting. I think Georgia had a great chance at a middle eight. I know you like that term this year. They were up 21-12. They had a chance to score before the half, and they were going to get the ball back.
Yeah, Golding makes the huge blunder not getting any points on that.
Correct.
That's a huge opportunity for Georgia, but its final possession offensively, its first possession offensive of the second half, they didn't get squat from that.
You know, one of the things, these games are supposed to be tight. They're supposed to be great. Razor-thin margins a little bit here. You know, Ole Miss messed up a lot, I thought, with them going for two a lot really early in the game. And I'm sure he would couch that by saying, hey, we're trying to win. Golding's the type of guy that says if I can go for a 4-point conversion, I probably would. But they don't allow them to do that, Brandon. But you see what Georgia was trying to do there, and you see how many times, I would like to call back, and one of the things, the story, Connor's always got a story up right now on DawgNation.com. Kirby Smart just said they blew it. That snap on that fourth down play when Georgia was trailing by 3, it's like we just messed it up. They were shuffling in and off like Marcus Freeman. Kirby Smart said, we shouldn't have snapped that ball there. That was on us. That was a miss.
Listen, that's important.
And they're not good enough to come back from 10 points down in a situation.
That's all really important, but the issue is the drive is going nowhere. The issue is you had to fake a punt because you're about to have a, third 3 and out in a row. You had to fake a punt to keep the drive alive. You had to try to do the Marcus Freeman gimmick because the drive is going nowhere. Yes, they messed up that 4th down. They should have handled that differently. They probably shouldn't have snapped it. But the drive was going nowhere. You're having to play gimmick football because you're not moving the ball. That's what that's what it is, right?
And remember how this team was supposed to be built to win, run the ball and stop the run. And Kewan Lacey had a big day today. He had a lot of carries. Georgia couldn't keep them off the field. And then they had a really special quarterback tonight, which goes to show you, hey, you can find a player like that anywhere. Georgia, they need to find players like that. They need to find, the portal opens this week, Brandon. And that's a dominant storyline going forward.
Okay, so we'll get back to phones. We're going to wrap up with a couple of calls here. But I'll say, I said I didn't think Kewan Lacey would be healthy. He essentially dunked on me tonight. I said that Ole Miss would miss its coaches. I think they probably did, but they still found it when they needed to. I guess they probably dunked on me too. So not the first time I've taken the L, and I'll take a big one there tonight. Austin's in Griffin. You're next up on our DawgNation Postgame call-in show. Austin, it's getting late, so we're going to lean on you to tell us what you think here. Georgia really squanders an opportunity, not just in this game, but maybe in the college football playoff beyond that to make a big run here. They leave a lot of meat on the bone to conclude this 2025 season. Give me your thoughts.
How are you?
I'm good.
I was just talking to Texas, Dog. I was telling him we have players. I know you're saying we need to maybe buy players. We bought Zach Branch. We bought Kobe Young. We've developed a lot of people, but they can only do what Mike Bobo's telling them to do. And I was telling Texas, Dog, he's been an offensive coordinator 2 decades and a head coach, and we will not be successful as a program. Yes, we'll be 11-1. We will not win a national championship with him as as the offensive coordinator. My wife's sitting over here before she went to bed, and she said, "Oh, I know what they're doing. They're doing a slip screen." Or, "Oh, I know what they're doing. They're doing a." I'm like, "How do you?" He's predictable. So, and then what was I hope I have enough time. They can't get open. I wrote some sticky notes listening to everybody, but they can't get open running screens. That's all I have to say. It's just I shaking my head. I'm listening to everybody. I appreciate you for taking my call.
Yeah, Austin, thanks for the phone call. And I get Georgia fans are frustrated. And listen, when the offense goes into a shell, the way that it did tonight for such a long time, this is what sports talk is. And this is what sports fans are going to do. There are a lot of people who invest a lot of time and a lot of years in Georgia football. There are a lot of Georgia fans in the stadium that invest a lot of money to be here tonight. They have a right to say their piece. And I know Kirby Smart doesn't agree with it, but we're going to give fans a platform to say what they're going to say. And when you go as long as Georgia did tonight without scoring, yes, the offensive coaches are going to be a part of that conversation.
I mean, what's the telling thoughts here, Brandon, is like when Dalen Everett gets that scoop and score where they force a play on Kewan Lacey. He fumbles the ball. He rarely ever fumbles the ball. They go run it in, and you thought, all right, Georgia has it. They're rolling. I think at that point they were averaging 9.9 yards per carry, and then all of that kind of shelled a little bit, and you saw Georgia kind of regress, and then that gave them the momentum to start making plays. Brandon, I think one of the things about Chambliss that really impresses me is he's really good on schedule, but he might even be better when he has to ad-lib and he has to roll around and run around. Like, how many times do you see a quarterback and you see him retreating and rolling around and all of a sudden there's a guy? He's one of those guys. I think he's going to be really tough to defend moving forward in this playoffs, and I think he made a ton of money for his future football career tonight.
Let me do 2 final phone calls. Let's get Christian in Canada. Christian, you're next up on our DawgNation Postgame call-in show. Christian, happy to have you joining the show. Happy 2026 to you. Wish we had happier news to discuss, but your opinion still matters to us, so give your reaction. Georgia loses in pretty surprising fashion and a very, very disappointing end to a season that certainly seemed to have a lot of promise just prior to today. React to it if you don't mind.
I've been just turned 22. Been a Georgia fan since I don't know how long, since birth. And I'm used to the second half dominance, with the Georgia Bulldogs and stuff like that. My question is two questions. What was Kirby Smart or Glenn Schumann thinking about with that last, 3rd and 5 play call with what was it? What's his name? DeMello Jones. I'm like, the dude is 5. He's these Ole Miss receivers are huge, and you're pressing on a 3rd and 5. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. I'm like, it just mind boggles me. And the second question is do you think Zach Branch could possibly return next year?
Well, I appreciate the phone call, Christian. Obviously, Branch has the opportunity to return if he wanted to. Thank you so much for joining us. He has the opportunity to return, but and I don't believe Zachariah made any kind of announcement tonight, but the sense that I get is, and I've told you before, because all these Georgia fans are talking about, go out and spend on this receiver, spend on that receiver. I've said before, I wouldn't mind spending big on bringing Branch back if you had the option to, but it may just be, and I think you believe this, it may just be that Zachariah is ready to try his hand at the NFL.
I mean, Georgia helped him a lot. That's what Georgia made him better. That's what he said. It made football fun. He lost a lot of games at USC. He got to play in huge moments where he thought his talents needed to be on a stage like this. Brandon, I can give you some news on both of that. Raylan Wilson was asked about his postseason future. His post-game future. He said he hadn't made a decision yet. He's going to have to think about that, whether he wants to move. He wants to move on to the next level. I think most would expect C.J. Allen would be doing so. One of the things, Raylan Wilson was out of the game for a little bit, then he jumped back in, and then the questions were posed to Zachariah Branch as well. He said he hadn't had time to think about that. That's the normal answer that you would expect somebody to give right now, but, lots of us as reporters and journalists, you still have to pose that question and know where he's at.
And the other thing that the caller brings up is the big bust where, unfortunately DeMello Jones is in coverage. It leads to the big play, and that's what Ole Miss needed to put itself in the position for what turned into be the game-winning field goal. I don't mind telling you, up there in the press box, high atop this Superdome, when that happens, I'm starting to pack up my stuff. I'm getting my because I've got to run down here and get ready to do the post-game show. I'm not just pouting. I do have to very quickly move down here, but that's all I needed to see. Their kicker had been great tonight. Once you had the big bust there, and I really don't know, did he get, caught in that, looking, or was Georgia trying to send extra pressure and so therefore had to put him in man? This has been one of those debates that Georgia's had a lot this season about, when it can cover man, when it has to stay zone. People were furious. What was the Tennessee game when Georgia was in kind of a soft zone coverage and that was getting picked apart? I think the Georgia cornerbacks over the course of the season, DeMello and Ellis a part of this, obviously grew into being a pretty good unit. There were some explosives that Georgia allowed tonight. Yeah. Clearly that's one that DeMello would like to have back, and you can't sugarcoat that. I'm sure there are 1,000 reasons schematically why perhaps that happened, but some of the stuff that Lane Kiffin would have gotten tonight, Charlie Weiss Jr. in his final game, or at least not his final game. Actually, Lane gets to watch his assistants work a little bit more at Ole Miss, but Charlie Weiss Jr. out from underneath the shadow of Lane Kiffin tonight got the kind of open man the way that Lane Kiffin would try to draw it up.
Brandon, I don't know if the cameras caught it on the broadcast, but you saw Kirby put his arm around DeMello right after that play and start loving on him. That's a really
DeMello's a good player. I mean, I don't think anybody thinks that DeMello's not a good player. That just wasn't a great moment.
Yeah, DeMello's got to learn from that. Short memory, that's what cornerbacks have to be. And let's face it, Brandon, DeMello and Ellis Robinson are going to be your cornerbacks next year. So
and by the way,
you'll be feeling good about it.
And by the way, I wouldn't take a pair of corners in the country more so than them. But obviously that just wasn't a good moment. And if you play cornerback long enough, you're going to get beat. I'm not trying to make it Pollyannish or like Disney dog type stuff. That's not what I'm trying to do. But I'm telling you right now, there is no better tandem of cornerbacks you could have coming back for next year than Ellis and DeMello. I wish tonight had gone different, probably for both of them. Certainly for DeMello on that last play, but you're still very happy to have them at Georgia next season, presuming that's what's going to be the case.
Yeah, and then you wish Georgia would have had a at least a couple more healthy safeties, at least one more in a lot of spots right there, Brandon. I know, do we have one more caller about?
One more call, yeah.
One more caller, but, we'll get to that caller first, but I've got one more meaty topic I want to talk to you about.
Please do that, but let's hear one more caller here. And by the way, for those of you who've joined us this season, I just appreciate it. I wish tonight was a happier conversation. I really do. But, man, one of the things that makes me very proud is the fact we're able to, including, 2 a.m. almost back in Georgia, the fact that we're able to provide this platform and so many of you use it so well, letting your thoughts be known about these Georgia Bulldogs. Chase is in Texas. We'll give you the final word here tonight, Chase. You're actually west of us. So, Chase, have at it here. Georgia loses. We're disappointed. This was a real opportunity that Georgia probably squandered. It probably did, and it probably only has itself to blame. So you can have the final word on that here tonight.
Yeah, man, it was about 12:49 my time, just sitting here in Texas. But
okay,
what I want to get through is this game was won for Ole Miss and then lost for Georgia based off opportunities squandered, and Ole Miss taking advantage of those opportunities at the end of the day. It was like 21-12 going into half, but you got the fortunate field goal blunder, obviously, like you stated. But look, we got the ball back at half, and then we got to stop right after that. We could have scored on one or two of the. We could have scored on one or both those possessions and put ourselves in a great opportunity, right? No matter what the play calling is at the end of the day, right? I know a lot of people like to talk about play calling, and the play calling wasn't great from what I've seen, but give a lot of credit to Ole Miss too, right? They were coming in the first half, and they were doing a lot of three down defensive linemen in the beginning of the first half, and in the second half they switched that up to 4 down personnel for the defensive line. And that allowed them to stop the run a lot more efficient than what they did in the first half. And then after that, Georgia just continued, kind of playing the same, running on first down, throw on second down, run on third down type deal, or just throw the ball 2 times. And obviously swing passes and stuff. But we've won games based on the swing passes too and screens. So, but the one big thing I want to point out too is at the very end of the game, we've lost the national championship on this type of play too. We're sitting at like 3rd and 5. Ole Miss is on their own 25, 30-yard line. And we're playing man coverage with 19 seconds left to go. There is no reason why we should play in any type of man coverage. 19 seconds left to go. Ole Miss has no timeouts. Look, if Ole Miss goes down the field and based off a prevent defense that we could have been in, they're not picking up a big chunk play like that. At the end of the day, is it possible? Yes, but it's a lot less likely. So, in my opinion, I think Georgia kind of just, blew it on that type of play right there. They could have went prevent like they usually do in those types of situations. I don't know why. I know it's like 3rd and 5, right? But at the end of the day, if we play prevent there, we tackle them in bounds. The game's pretty much over at that point. If not, they might get one more play off. So, pretty much excuseless on why we're playing any type of man coverage with 3rd and 5 with 19 seconds left to go with Ole Miss on their own 25, 30-yard line or whatever it was. So,
yeah, Chase, I think you bring up some really good points, and I appreciate Chase, I think you bring up some really good points. I appreciate the phone call. Yeah, people are going to kind of point to that, with what they're going to just call as man coverage with DeMello there. Now, I will play the opposite side of that, at least a little bit of. There have been plenty of times this year when Georgia's been caught in zone, and people have been mad about that in the post-game call-in show too. But I think that Chase brings up some pretty good points that, obviously how that happened and how Georgia let Ole Miss march down the field on them, it is going to go back, and people are going to Monday morning quarterback that as they have a right to do. And when Georgia could not punch it in right here and get the touchdown, I think it knew it had a chance of being some real trouble. They were trying to take the lead in the hopes of forcing Ole Miss to have to try to score a touchdown. But when Georgia had to settle for the tie, I think that Georgia knew, just given how this defense had been playing against an Ole Miss offense that had gotten hot, I think that Georgia knew that Ole Miss had the advantage at that point.
Not only was the pass incomplete, it was almost intercepted in the end zone as well, Brandon. And that's one of those things where you just look at it.
And by the way, shout out to Dalen Everett, who almost got the interception after the big completion. I mean, that's another woulda, coulda, shoulda, and Dalen laid his life on the line to go try to make that catch. But if he pulls that, and then all of a sudden we're not having to have the diagnosis of the blown cover.
You know, one of the things there, Brandon, is they didn't have any more timeouts left, so they couldn't run the ball, so they had to throw the ball. And then after Dalen about pickpocketed one, they started airmailing the balls over just to bleed off some time on the clock to make it harder for Georgia in that moment. But, like, you know, it's one of those things, Brandon, when you come into this football game and you have a lead and you can't put a team away and the guy starts making plays and giving the team life. I mean, there's so much woulda, coulda, shoulda in this game, Brandon. I don't know if you remember it, but like when Georgia finally got a stop before they got the ball back and came down and kicked the field goal, I mean, Georgia gets a tackle behind the line by Joseph Jonah Ajonye, but very clearly these Big Ten officials who missed a lot tonight, they missed a face mask clearly. He jerked his neck around. They didn't see that, and it's one of those things that you wonder are calls being made up here. And, you know, we appreciate the platform the callers have had, Brandon, but there's one thing I want to just have an honest discourse with you right now.
By all means.
You know, I think what we have to do in our job is kind of chroniclers or stewards of Georgia football for this great fan base and these people that kind of look at us. This is a question we ask some of the players.
I have no idea what you're about to say.
Brandon, I just want to think. I think this is like, you know, one of the embers of the season here. Do you think this was a successful 2025 Georgia season?
No.
We said before this game, before we went into this week, Georgia needed to win this week to call this a successful season. And you can talk about back-to-back SEC championships. You can talk about getting the Alabama monkey off their back a little bit in the SEC championship game, where finally Mercedes-Benz Stadium does not feel like the Superdome does to us right now. But it's one of those things. What did Kirby Smart say this week in his press conferences? He looks at every team, and he hates it how you're judged by whether you won it all or not. And he simply looks at it as, did we get the best we could out of this football team? I think they fall short.
Yeah, of course. And listen, was this a fun Georgia season? Oh, my gosh. Yeah. How many great memories do we make? Fun to even come to New Orleans. Fun to win the SEC championship. Was it a fun season? Do I love Georgia today as much as I did this morning and as much as I did 10 years ago and 30 years before that? Absolutely. My heart is full from the standpoint that I get to be around this great product, college football, and in particular this team that I'm very proud to share a state with, the Georgia Bulldogs. All of that is fantastic, but this is big boy football here. We're playing for big dollars, and everybody on that field behind me, coaches on the sideline, players in the field, they're all well paid here. So we're going to do some big boy evaluations, and when you have the resources that Georgia has, far more than Ole Miss has had historically speaking, and most of the rest of the SEC too, you needed to do more than this to have a successful season. You just did. And I'm happy that Georgia won the SEC. But let's be honest about two things. Thing number one, the value of beating Alabama is diminished because they lost 38-3 today, or 38-10, I guess the final was. When Alabama gets its teeth kicked in by Indiana, Georgia doesn't get to brag about that quite as much as they once did, and that's just how life goes. And I'm sorry, but that's just how life goes. You don't get the same bragging rights on beating Alabama when Indiana dribbled them like a basketball today. You just don't. Here's the second thing. I'm not even so sure the SEC championship game is going to exist in a couple of years. So this notion of, well, we won the SEC championship, one of these days we may have to explain to our grandkids what that even was. And I love the SEC championship, but in this day and age in which everything's about the college football playoff, you know, claiming a prize pre-college football playoff, it's just hard to do that in the modern landscape. I loved this team. I loved watching this team. I had a lot of fun with this team. This was not a successful season.
One of the things, Brandon, I think this season will be the way it will be remembered is Georgia's culture, its development, its infrastructure, maybe covered up for a lot of things it didn't have. And a lot of that was youth, but most of college football is young right now. And you look at, you know, what Ole Miss went through. They had a powerhouse team a year ago where they had to replenish and replace at the same time. I think this has become, when it's win all, take all in these playoffs, you know, that's a very hard conversations that need to be had, because Georgia, I think, will have them starting this week about, do we need to get a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more spend at the running back position? Is there more spend at the wide receiver position? I'm going to tell you what, Brandon, I think they might get 2 or 3 receivers out of the portal, but they're going to look at Landon Roldan, Talon Taylor, Thomas Blackshear, Tyler Williams, and C.J. Wiley. And Sokovie White, those guys are going to have to be some of the top 6 right there next year, no matter who they get in the portal.
And look, let me add one more thing, and you kind of touched on this too. me saying what I said as an outsider making an evaluation, that's a little bit different than being on the inside and saying, as coaches, I'm sure a lot of those guys feel like this team got better as the season progressed. They had a chance to trend far worse than the end result ended up being. So the coaches can take some pride in performance in that. The players themselves, especially the guys who had to put their life on the line just to even be back on the football field in a game like this, of course you take pride in performance. I'm not saying that people involved shouldn't take some pride in performance. Of course they should. But, look, these are the evaluations that exist in the big boy world. And we look at this based on the standard that Georgia set for itself, the standard that it aspires to, based on the number of Georgia fans that are asked to spend, tens upon tens of thousands of dollars to support this program. There has to be a degree of accountability. And I'm glad you tried hard. I'm glad you got better. I'm glad you improved. But the expectation for Georgia is higher than this.
One of the things, Brandon, I don't want to discredit the effort, because we saw amongst people Nate Frazier hobbling by here. We saw Monroe Freeling still really torn up about it. And, he's a guy that either is going to come back to Georgia and run it back and help them maybe be one of those top 3 teams in the country, or he'll think about, maybe I need to go play pro football. That's something he'll have to weigh as a aspiring professional football player. We're not saying, at least I'm not saying, that these players, clearly they redlined the effort. They gave all they could. I just think Georgia needs more than what it's trying to do, because I think they've got a roster. I used this comment earlier, this parallel earlier. I think they've got a roster that's going to win a lot of regular season games. But here's a cold, hard fact, Brandon. These 5 stars that are on this roster, sooner or later they're going to cycle out. This is the way college football is going to go. Georgia's going to go from having 15, 16, 17 five stars on the roster to about 6, 7, or 8. And you've got to find a way to whether you portal the guy in, you find a guy like the Auburn wide receiver that came in, a guy that is an instant matchup nightmare that helps a Gunner Stockton in the ways that Zachariah Branch did as well. You've got to look at some of those things, because you're not going to get those 5 stars every year and stack them one on top of each other.
Yeah, it's interesting questions, maybe some tough answers, and a lot for Georgia internally to sift through. And we'll obviously watch as they do that. We'll have our own opinions on it. You'll have your own opinions on it. And we'll all have these conversations online as we always have. But for now, we'll leave it here. Georgia loses the Sugar Bowl in disappointing fashion to Ole Miss. It is Ole Miss with Pete Golding, believe it or not, that's going to move on to the college football playoff semifinal, and Georgia's going to go back home, lick its wounds, figure out what went wrong, and as Jeff Sentell just said, to figure out where it goes here. So as we wrap up, let me say thank you to all of you who do this with us in good times and bad times. You have no idea how privileged I feel, how blessed I feel to be able to do this.
The word grateful is also
yeah, grateful is a great word too. I love the people that I work with, like my good friend Jeff Sentell. I love the conversation we get to have. Georgia football means the world to me. I'm very, very proud to be from Georgia, and I love Georgians. And our football team is the Georgia Bulldogs, so they can go 0-12, they can go 12-0. They're going to be my team every single year, the same way many of you feel the same way. But when things don't go well, we're obviously going to come in here and try to be as honest as we possibly can. That's what we've certainly strived to do tonight. So starting tomorrow, we'll pick up the pieces and we'll figure out where Georgia goes from here with the transfer portal, with recruits looking to step up, maybe get their chance to make names for themselves, and guys who had opportunities this year stepping into an even bigger role in 2026. Obviously around here, that conversation never ends, and the chase for whatever Georgia can be in 2026, it'll begin tomorrow. We'll do one more edition of Dawg Nation Daily in New Orleans, and then I think I probably said this before, we're going to come back to Georgia, and boy, I think the SEC's contract with the Sugar Bowl is actually ending. Wow. I think. So with all due respect, I love the food in New Orleans. I don't want to see the inside of the Superdome again for a very long time if I can possibly help it. Yeah, actually, as Jay Black points out, DawgNation Day comes up later on today, unfortunately. So thanks to all of you. And I'm also going to say thank you to Jay and all the folks who work with him on a regular basis. Kamal and Tristan and Mackenzie. Danny's there today. You have no idea how hard the work is behind the scenes to make someone like me who says a bunch of dumb stuff and whatever, to make me look good on camera, at least better than I otherwise would. I'm so appreciative of that, too. Staying late tonight, my gosh, it's nearly 2 o'clock in the morning back in Atlanta. I appreciate that, too. So we're going to wrap up from here. We'll come back tomorrow, and y'all know the drill. There'll be happy conversations again, and hopefully when the things are good, nobody celebrates harder than us. And when things are not quite so good, hopefully nobody's more honest than we are. That's what we try to do. Maybe we get it right. Maybe we don't. That's for you to judge, and honestly, your opinion matters to us on that. But we've certainly done our best here tonight. Georgia loses. Season comes to an end. I kind of can't believe it, but that is what the story is. So have a great night. Happy New Year. And we'll see you very soon back here on the DawgNation video channels, including DawgNation Daily later on this morning. Have a great night, everybody.